Hello and welcome to the Retreading Business YouTube channel. In issue number 2 of the Retreadcast, we were able to welcome David Stevens, who is the Managing Director of TRIB in the USA, and he will hopefully be a regular contributor to this new publishing format. David spoke at length about the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on the US market. For those viewers who would like to see the whole of that interview, here now is that interview in full.
Welcome back to the Retreadcast, and we are now joined by a second guest of the day, and one we hope that is going to be a regular contributor to the Retreadcast, will bring a different perspective on the retreading industry from the North America market. David Stevens has been the Managing Director of TRIB, the Tyre Retread and Repair Information Bureau, for 10 years. He travels around the world and participates in conference and trade fairs in markets far and wide. David, welcome to the Retreadcast. It's good to have you here. How are you doing?
Thanks, Richard. It's great to be here. Yeah, like everybody else around the world, just trying to survive the new normal of pandemic. And you mentioned traveling to all the various trade shows, and obviously that's been a big change for us. So with everything canceled for the time being, just adjusting to that new world that we live in.
Definitely, I suppose it's something we can't miss, the COVID-19 impact. Obviously there's so much going on in global business as it is, but it's something we need to start by talking about. So what is the COVID-19 impact on the US retreading market?
Yeah, I mean, I think like many places, there was an immediate, downturn in business for a lot of places, just depending upon the types of businesses they served. But also there was some places where there was an uptick in business, and sometimes that happened even within one company. So one example I use is, a trucking company that has an entire business of delivering frozen pizzas. Well, their frozen pizza delivery business to grocery stores is booming because people are buying a lot of those and still buying stuff from grocery stores. But the other half of their business, which was delivering to schools, is basically disappeared overnight. And there's a lot of instances in that where you have certain parts of the economy that are completely shut down, and certain parts of the economy that have increased, package delivery, for instance, people ordering online and getting deliveries. So the retreaders that service those markets have obviously seen an increase in business. I think in talking to many of our members around the U.S., it's a little bit up and down all over the place, but not as bad as some people initially expected. But I think we're also in the early phases of that. And you had, going back to April, there was a little bit of almost like panic buying toilet paper. Some people were panic buying tires, coming into the retreaders and saying, "Hey, I want to get the 3 month supply of this," or so I think May will be a pretty critical month for the retreading industry, and see what happens, see how the businesses look overall, if there's particular areas of, more decreases, or if there's some bright spots. And it's so varied from region to region, also depending on how hard hit certain geographies of the US are by the coronavirus. Also, relative to what the governors of each of those states, and sometimes even the mayors of those cities, the plans that they have implemented for, shutdowns or partial shutdowns, and now moving into openings or partial openings. And it's a tricky situation for our members to navigate, because especially those people that operate in different geographies or regions, it's trying to figure out the rules that they need to follow, and also the requirements of some of their customers as well. So it's a tricky situation for everybody, and we're just trying to do our part to help our members navigate those tricky situations.
Okay, so bearing in mind that the market may well take a bit of a downturn due to coronavirus, how is TRIB supporting its members during this period?
Well, I think, a lot of what we've tried to do in the very early stages was just sharing information that we thought would be relevant and helpful to our members. And that's shifted as we've gone through the weeks. At first it was, okay, here's the information that we have about the pandemic and how you can keep your members safe. We've created a coronavirus resources page on our website, which many other associations and businesses have done, but hopefully it's a catch-all for a lot of the things that they need to safely operate their businesses. And then as the government moved into assistance phase, we started, trying to parse through the various programs, the emergency loan relief program, the PPP program here in the US, and providing resources to members, explaining to them how to apply as those programs changed, and how they successfully navigate all the things that they need to do to try and get money for their business. And now we're starting to shift into more of, well, what does it look like as we come out of this? So, how do you operate a business successfully going forward? What are some of the ideas around that? How do you make sure that your employees stay safe? So, as we're trying to sift through the information, we try and do our best to say, well, how is this relevant for our members? And what can we share with them without overloading them with a ton of information, but say, I think this might be helpful for our members. And we've gotten great feedback from people as well, saying, that was very helpful. Like I was struggling with the loan program, for instance, and, the step-by-step guide you had for calculating expenses and filing was great information for us. So we'll just try and keep that going as we hopefully come out the other side of this. And it's really about just listening to our members and understanding what the challenges are that they face and how we as an association can best help them.
Interesting. I mean, obviously we're talking here from a US perspective, and globally, when we look at like trade fairs and exhibitions, not just in the tire sector, we've seen all these events completely decimated, cancelled or postponed in other aspects. What impact do you think we will expect to see on trade fairs in the US? And these are trade fairs that obviously you guys will normally participate in.
Yeah, I mean, we had some very immediate, we have a normal schedule of trade shows that we go to and educational events that we participate in. The biggest first one that got canceled is the largest trucking show in the US every year, the Mid-America Trucking Show in Louisville. And it had a couple of knock-on effects for us. I mean, we do a big educational campaign where we do our Spot the Retreads contest, where we have new and retreaded tires, and we get the thousands of participants to look at those and try and see if they can tell the difference, which the vast majority can't. We had also had, for the first time, an educational conference scheduled at the show itself, where we were going to bring manufacturers in, and have them talk about the retreading process, answer questions directly from the fleets themselves that are in attendance, and especially those owner-operators who might have a little more long-held misconceptions about retreading. And, on a sort of a professional level for TRIB as an organization, we have 2 of our annual board meetings during that show as well, and we were unable to go forward with that. And then you just have a knock-on effect through the rest of the summer. We were the Global Retreading Conference, which was supposed to take place in Cologne. TRIB was going to be speaking at that, participating in the event as an exhibitor. Then you have the Latin America Tire Show. We have a Great America Show coming up in the US in August, which is at this point still on, but there's some questions about that. And then obviously the big show in Las Vegas in the fall, still being planned, but, you talk to people and there's a lot of people that are still taking a wait and see approach. So, as an organization, we believe that those events and those trade shows provide great opportunities for us to talk directly to users and potential users of retreaded tires. So it's trying to find ways that we can replace those educational sessions through our electronic means, and then also being ready to go when hopefully things start to open back up again and we can be out on the road visiting our members and going to those various events where we can help educate people about the benefits of retreading.
Okay, so as publishers, we've seen a lot of different stories, great stories about how retreaders around the world are are supporting their employees and communities during the pandemic. What stories can you tell us about how US retreaders are responding to this challenge?
Yeah, I think that, the same thing, and they've sort of looked at it in, three main areas. First and foremost, how can they protect their employees? So a lot of those retreaders and retread manufacturers immediately looked at, okay, well, what protocols do we need to put in place in our plants, our warehouses, our retail environments for those that have it, to make sure that we protect our employees. And then next, how do we service our customers? So how do we make sure that, we manage our supply chain issues so that we don't impact the customers that are relying on our tires to keep products moving? And, fortunately, early on in the pandemic response, everything related to transportation was deemed essential in the U.S. So retreaders were able to stay open, still provide products for their customers, because obviously truckers themselves are serving a real need that we need in the U.S. and around the world in terms of making sure products still flow throughout the supply chain. And, fortunately, I think, some of our members were a little bit worried about supply chain interruptions or struggles finding certain materials. So far, we haven't really heard of that from them, and they've been able to stay in operation. Now, many of them have had to cut back a little bit based upon what they're seeing from a business perspective, but most of the folks that I talk to are still, very much operational. Maybe they've taken one day off or a shift down just to sort of manage the demand that's there. And so it's about, putting those protocols in place to keep everybody safe within the plant, delivering out what their customers need. And then lastly, figuring out what they can do for their community. And for a lot of them, it's, we just want to make sure that trucks keep moving. So, and, as you guys know, retreading is very geographic centric. So when those retreaders operate in a place in, central Pennsylvania, they're servicing customers around that diameter in central Pennsylvania. So they're making sure that people are getting their groceries, getting their deliveries, meeting the needs of their local customers. And then also it's them, they also give back to their community in a lot of ways, by, if they had, additional personal protection equipment, donating it to a local hospital that needed it. So eye protection that they've had, doing fundraising campaigns to try and raise money for their local charities, replacing, in-person events that they may have had in the past with online giving campaigns, looking at providing discounts for customers that either need it from a need-based perspective, or especially those first responders or healthcare workers, sort of recognizing the efforts that they're putting forward to help all of us, and then providing them with extra levels of service and discounts where they need it. So, retreading is very much a family-oriented industry and business, and community-minded, oriented business, and I think that has come through this challenge as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting how you say how US retreaders are responding to this crisis, and obviously they've had to respond to that crisis in such a short space of time and implement changes that they probably would never have considered in the months preceding that or the years before that. Going forward, what do you think when the restrictions are lowered and brought back into what we consider normal, what do you think the environment will be like for retreaders to operate in what everyone's referring to as a new normal?
Yeah, I think, in some respects, the retreading industry is better positioned to come back from this than many other manufacturing facilities. For your viewers that have either been in a retread plant or may not be familiar with it, with those very distinct stations throughout a retread plant, it actually provides for a decent amount of social distancing. So when you get from initial inspection into buffing, now there are some plants that are a little more cramped, but I think there's ways that many of those plants could create the correct amount of space to allow their employees to be safe. And I think those will continue as they go forward and come out of this. Is like, what sort of changes do we need to make in our production, which are hopefully very minimal, to help protect all of our employees. And then it's looking at, the things like the break room, where they check in, how they manage the numbers of employees that are coming in and out during regular operations, and then any of those customer-facing areas of the plant as well. What changes they need to make going forward. But hopefully, I think, again, for the retreading industry, some of those changes will hopefully be more minimal than they might be in other industries where you have people working in a plant shoulder to shoulder. And there's a little more opportunity for some space with that. I think many of them are focused on making sure that they have the inventory to meet what is hopefully an increase in demand from their customers as trucking starts to pick up again. And some of those industries that may have been either declined over the last month or two or dormant because of some of the restrictions, as they start to kick back, the plants themselves and the retreaders want to make sure that they have inventory on hand to meet those needs, and then also keep the plants going and keep output going at the levels that their customers expect.
Yeah, which of course brings us on to the final question, and it's a crucial one, is that what impact will all this have on the market in the short, medium and longer term? What does the forecast look like for US retreading for the rest of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really cloudy crystal ball to look into, just because there's so many factors that play into that. I mean, if you start, in a normal world where you have an economic calamity like this, retreading is generally a counter-cyclical industry. So that as the economy goes down, retreading generally goes up because people are looking for a lower cost solution compared to some of the new tire purchases that they're making. So retreading as a mix in their portfolio of tires that they're using generally goes up as the economy comes down. And we hope that's the case, as and obviously the story of retreading from a total cost of ownership and total cost per mile has always provided a greater benefit than either a low quality, low cost tier 4 tire. When you marry a quality virgin tire with multiple retreads, you're definitely still going to get a lower cost of ownership. But you have those consumers, particularly smaller fleets and owner operators, as I mentioned at the outset, that might have some of those myths about retreading, and they're sort of pulled into the market a little bit more, looking at the cost advantages. And so they're forced to sharpen their pencils a little bit and figure out, how can I have the best return on my investment in tires when, the margins have gotten really thin for my trucking business. But there's, who knows what's going to happen with the virus here in the US. There's talk about another peak based upon, behaviors that are happening here in the US. How quickly are some places going to be open? Are they going to be able to stay open? Or are there new restrictions that are going to have to be put in place? And all of those things ultimately have a big impact on the trucking demand, which then has an impact on the retread demand. And just to keep adding to that stew of storminess within the crystal ball, tariffs went in place, and they were starting to have, in 2019, had a really positive impact on the retreading industry in the US. It's the first year we were either flat or had a slight increase in retreading, because the tariffs on Chinese truck and bus imported tires started to, at the end of 2019, have a positive impact on retreading in the US. And it was looking like that would continue into 2020. And then, we all know what happened from there. And so it's a question of, how are the tariffs going to have, what sort of impact are they going to have ongoing? And a lot of those Chinese companies are manufacturing now have, moved to Thailand and Vietnam and are starting to bring product back into the US. And then, you know, to me, there's a question too, and I think this is something that retreaders can take advantage of in this time. Is like, you know, especially in the U.S., is this idea that, well, maybe it's time for me to support my local retreader. So instead of buying a product that's been manufactured somewhere overseas and shipped into the U.S., you know, there's a retread company here in my state, you know, that I could potentially support, and I know that they're going to support U.S. manufacturing jobs, and they're going to deliver a quality product that drives a lower cost for me. So you throw all those variables into the mix, and, you know, I would hope it would be very positive for the retread industry, but a lot of it is just going to be driven by what happens with coronavirus and the changes that each of those individual states or industries have to make as we go forward into the year. And, you know, when I talk to our members and retreaders, again, you know, this month is a pretty critical month. I think many of them were expecting to see a downturn. You know, they saw a little bump in April. Some of them saw decreases, and, you know, they were concerned about what was going to happen in May. And then I think as the economy starts to open up more and more in the US, you know, hopefully we'll start to see increases again and getting us somewhere back to normal for the retread industry.
Yeah, I think that the point you make about focusing on local support, I think that'll be a very interesting trend to see how that develops, not just in the retreading industry, but, you know, from a consumer point of view in terms of food. You know, I'm thinking a lot more myself about, instead of buying from a supermarket, buying from a fruit and veg store. And, you know, I'm sure there'll be many people considering whether to use big online retailers and look, you know, down a high street shop. So it'll be interesting to see if that, you know, if that transfers across to the retread industry. But anyway, David, thank you for your time with this. It's been very illuminating to see what's going on in the US. TRIB is doing a fantastic job over there, and we're looking forward to catching up with you shortly for more perspectives on the retreading in North America.
Great. Well, thanks for the time. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in person soon, and instead of over a video conferencing application.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.